Good evening, everybody. It's Ken Iverson, 6 minutes after 7 on Thursday, September 9th, 2 days before the anniversary of September 11th, 2001. And it's occurred to me that you may wonder who this guy is who's recording these videos on YouTube and putting them out for the public. Everybody's invited to take a look at these if they want to. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ken Iverson. Kenneth Alfred Iverson is my given name. I am. I am. I wrote out some credentials here. Several months ago, and this is what I had to say. Credentials for Ken Iverson. First of all, I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm 67 years old, and then I could back up and I could say that I'm a Homo sapien. I'm a human being, and that's probably preeminent amongst the things that I am or am not. I'm a human being. I have no religious affiliation. I was baptized and raised in the Methodist Church. I joined the Kent United Methodist Church when I was 12. That's about a mile from where I'm seated right now. It was downtown in Kent on Meeker and Central when I was growing up, and I taught Sunday school there to 4th and 5th graders when I was in high school. I gave a sermon at my church during my Christmas break of my freshman year in college. I have not considered myself a Christian since age 18, after attending a week-long series of lectures by the Reverend Canon Brian Green. I remember him well. He passed away not too long ago, or several years ago, at the Stanford Memorial Church, Stanford, California, USA. He said the minimum requirement in order to call yourself a Christian is to believe, except on faith, that Jesus is the Son of God. I do not believe, as a matter of faith, that Jesus was the Son of God, maybe a good and wise man, but not the Son of God. Muhammad was not the son of Allah. The Buddha was not the Son of God. Christianity is the only world religion that has as its central figure the claim that he or she is the Son of God. I do not believe this, and therefore I do not consider myself a Christian. Now, getting on with my credentials. No religious affiliation is the first one. That's important. I'll maybe talk of that some other time. My high school career, Kent-Meridian High School. Well, first of all, I went to Angle Lake Elementary, which is now in the city of SeaTac, and it's burned to the ground. Last summer, I don't know if it burned to the ground, but it burnt pretty much up. Last summer, I was with some friends, Ralph and Margaret Iverson, no relation. We were having dinner, and we saw the school on fire, the Angle Lake Elementary School. That's where I went for the first 6 years. Then my family moved. My mother married my stepfather after my father had died in 1953. My stepfather's wife, had died in childbirth in several years prior, and or a year or so prior, and Mom and Ed met, and they as the saying goes, the rest is history. And so we moved to Kent. My family, my sister Vicky, my grandmother Elizabeth Mary. I'll have more to say about her. Wright, and my mother Ada Mary Wright Iverson Turner moved to Kent. And that's where my mother right now is living, in the home where she has lived since 1955, the year we moved to Kent. It was we moved here in August of 1955. And their honeymoon, they were married July 27th, I believe, in 1955, and they spent their honeymoon in Hawaii. And they drove from San Francisco. They drove to San Francisco and took the plane to Hawaii. In those days, SeaTac didn't have a direct flight to Hawaii, or an indirect flight either, for that matter. I graduated from Kent-Meridian. I went to Kent Junior High School in Kent here, Kent-Meridian Junior High School. Now it's called Mill Creek. It's sort of an alternative school or an extension school or something like that. It's been completely remodeled, and it's a part of the Kent School District. There was one high school in Kent when I attended Kent-Meridian High School. There are 4 high schools now: Kentwood, Kent Lake, Kent Ridge, and Kent-Meridian, 4 high schools. And there are numerous grade schools and numerous junior high schools. So there was one junior high school, and there was one high school when I graduated from Kent-Meridian in 1961. So I have Kent-Meridian High School. That's the second part of my credentials. I was valedictorian, president of my senior class, voted by my classmates, football captain, voted by my teammates, most outstanding male senior, voted by faculty, football inspirational award winner, voted by teammates, basketball 8th man on a number 1 rated team in Washington State 1960 through 61 season. We lost to Garfield High School of Seattle in the 3rd game of the state tournament. We finished 3rd. Garfield first. My only regret from high school is that we did not win the state tournament. I still think about that every March when the tournaments come up. There are now classifications. There was 1 classification in those days, and now there are 4 or 5 classifications. I think of that when the state tournaments come up for the high school students here in the state of Washington, that we did not win the championship. The state tournament championship. We were not state tournament champions in 1960-61. This would be in March of 1961, and we lost to Garfield of Seattle. They were a very good team. I think we were a good team too, and we were pretty evenly matched. I think they beat us by 3 points. So no sour grapes. They beat us. College. This is the third part of my credentials. College, Stanford University, BA 65, 1965. History, emphasis on political science and on Africa, African history and political science, and so on. Freshman at Stanford, president of my dormitory, special section of the history of Western civilization. My freshman dormitory was in the shadow of Hoover Tower, the Hoover Institution, where Ronald Reagan got so many members of his administration, and the Hoover Institute was founded by Herbert Hoover, a Stanford graduate and a Republican president who was in office when Black Friday came down in October of 1929, the beginning of the Great Depression. And I like to say that Herbert Hoover was to Franklin Roosevelt as George W. Bush is to Barack Obama. Hoover left this country in a mess, and George Bush left this country in a mess. Franklin Roosevelt cleaned up the mess that Herbert Hoover left, and Barack Obama is left cleaning up the mess that George W. Bush left. 2 unfunded wars, or 2 wars that are bankrupting us, tax cuts for the rich, and nothing to do with social programs that Barack Obama has associated. His healthcare reform wasn't even talked about during the time of Bush. That's something that the Republicans have now got religion about, but they promised to repeal health care reform if they're elected in November of 2010. And we cannot let that happen. All Democrats, we cannot let that happen. We cannot let the Republicans get control of the House and Senate and repeal health care reform, Wall Street reform, and the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. They'll rescind the rights of gays and lesbians and bis and transgender. They will block immigration reform. They'll take this country back to the good old days of George W. Bush. You know what happened with George W. Bush. Don't let that happen. Don't anybody who's listening to this, don't let that happen. This is serious stuff. We cannot let that happen. We cannot go back to the failed policies of George W. Bush. So, when I was a sophomore, how are we doing on time here? We got time here. Sophomore, I was at Stanford in Italy, Florence. I visited every major country in Western Europe, including Turkey and the UK. I visited the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. I studied the Italian language and culture and politics. I took a gondola ride in Venice. I studied European economics and Renaissance history and art. I visited the Soviet Union, Moscow and Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. I met Pablo Casals, one of the world's greatest cellists. I visited La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Spain. I walked the same streets that Vincent van Gogh had in Arles, France. I visited the museum in Amsterdam, housing many of his paintings. Van Gogh is one of my heroes. If you watch these videos, you know I have several heroes. I identify with him in more ways than one. I also volunteered at Casa Cares in Florence, founded by an American minister and for Italian orphans. One of my American friends in the Stanford group met his future wife there, Nuvolina, little cloud in Italian, an Italian volunteer, because she was named Nuvolina because her parents loved the American West and American Indians. I met Stefano there, who took to me. We spent much time together. I regret that I did not stay in touch with Stefano after I returned to the U.S. I spent hours in some of the world's great museums, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Prado in Madrid, the Hermitage in Leningrad, the Tate Gallery in London, the Louvre in Paris, and many more. I visited the Museum of Religion and Atheism in the Soviet Union. I visited a boarded-up St. Basil's off of Red Square. I filed past Lenin's embalmed body in his mausoleum on Easter morning, 1963, just outside the Kremlin walls. I remember thinking to myself, would as many people be here this morning if Christ's body were entombed here? There were thousands who piled past that Easter morning. Russian people, most of them Russian people. My junior year at Stanford, I was registering blacks to vote in late October while I went into that in the part on the early civil rights movement. I was registering blacks to vote in late October and early November 1963 in a mock election for governor of Mississippi. The candidate was a black man named Aaron Henry. The purpose was to show that the black vote could and would be a force in Southern politics, and particularly in Mississippi. President Obama was 2 years old at that time. It was 3 weeks before President Kennedy was shot and killed. Wow. The following summer was a Freedom Summer, and many students from Stanford, Yale, and other institutions spread across the South to register blacks to vote and to organize. That was the summer when Goodwin, Cheney, and Swerner, civil rights workers, were murdered. I was in Africa the summer of 1964. It is a long way from I'm repeating now, it is a long way from a mock election in Mississippi on November 4th, 1963, to the White House on November 4th, 2008. A period of only 45 years, but of light years in terms of social and cultural distance traveled. And it was a long-distance telephone call from the White House to this Peace Day organizer home in Kent, Washington, on Tuesday, July 6, 2010, and the day President Obama put Peace Day on the map. That is just one of the things I am grateful for. This is just one of the things for which I am grateful for President Obama. And then, let's see, how are we doing on time? We got another minute. I'll read a few more paragraphs here. This is a project that I worked on when I was at Stanford during spring break. Don't remember exactly what year. It was sophomore or junior. I guess it was when I was a junior. Vallejo, California, Country Club Crest, community organizer, voting, Planned Parenthood, poor black section of Vallejo, 1963. Many abandoned and foreclosed upon homes, distrust and mistrust of authorities. One of the most dangerous places in California today, 2010. Senior, Operation Crossroads Africa, the Gambia, West Africa. The Gambia was where Alex Haley's African ancestor, Kunta Kinte, was captured and taken into slavery. Story is the basis of Roots, the book and the TV miniseries of the early 1970s. I organized an all-campus conference, 8 locations on Africa, Institute of International Relations upon my return to Stanford. I enlisted several African scholars as well as students who had spent time in Africa, and we're coming up on time here. So I'll have a second installment here on who I am. and so you have some idea who this guy is who's recording on.